The solicitor's voice droned on, but Charlotte Blackwood heard nothing after the words, quote, underscore, 0, underscore. She stood frozen in her father's study. The room still smelled of him, pipe tobacco, sea salt embedded in the leather chairs, the faint trace of ink from his logbooks. 3 weeks ago, Captain Edward Blackwood had been alive. Now his widow sat behind his mahogany desk, wearing mourning black that somehow looked triumphant. "There must be a mistake," Charlotte said. Her voice came out steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. "My father would never—" "The document is quite clear, Miss Blackwood." The solicitor adjusted his spectacles. He would not meet her eyes. "The entire estate, including the shipping company and all 7 vessels, passes to Mrs. Blackwood. Furthermore, there is the matter of the stolen necklace." Charlotte's blood turned to ice. "What necklace?" Agatha rose from the desk. She moved like a cat approaching wounded prey, slowly, savoring each step. "The black pearl necklace, dear. Your mother's necklace. The one I discovered missing from the safe this morning." "I never touched that necklace." "Then how do you explain this?" Agatha lifted a silk handkerchief from the desk. Inside lay 3 black pearls, luminous as midnight water. Charlotte recognized them instantly. They had rested against her mother's throat in every portrait. "These were found in your bedroom," Agatha continued, "under your mattress. Really, Charlotte, if you intended to steal from your own family, you might have chosen a better hiding place." The trap closed around her with an almost audible snap. Charlotte looked from Agatha to the solicitor to the man standing silent by the window. Mr. Carmichael, owner of the largest competing shipping company in London. His presence made no sense, unless— "You planned this," Charlotte breathed. "Both of you." "Grief does terrible things to the mind." Carmichael spoke for the first time. His voice was oil poured over gravel. "Perhaps a rest in the country would benefit you, Miss Blackwood. Or perhaps somewhere more distant." Agatha's smile stretched thin as a blade. "I am afraid we cannot have a thief under this roof." "For the family's reputation, you understand. The servants will help you gather your things. You have 1 hour. "I am his daughter." Charlotte's voice rose. "I am Edward Blackwood's only child. You came into this house as a servant, a governess he pitied enough to marry. You have no right—" "I have every right." Agatha's mask slipped for just a moment. Beneath it lay something cold and hungry. "I have a signed will. I have witnesses. I have a respectable solicitor who will swear to your father's final wishes. And you, my dear stepdaughter, have nothing, not even a good name. Not anymore." The words struck like physical blows. Charlotte looked around the study. Her father's globe, which she had spun as a child while he traced the trade routes with his finger. His naval charts, rolled and stored in brass tubes. His pipe, still resting in its stand as though he might return any moment to fill it. All of it stolen. "You will regret this," Charlotte said quietly. Agatha laughed. The sound tinkled like breaking glass. "Threats from a disgraced thief. How delightful. Geoffrey, please escort my stepdaughter to the door. She need not trouble with packing. Nothing here belongs to her anymore." The butler approached. Charlotte had known him since childhood. His face showed nothing. No sympathy, no recognition of the girl who had once brought him sweets from the kitchen. She was already erased. Charlotte walked toward the door. Each step felt like drowning. At the threshold, she paused. On the mantelpiece sat her father's pocket watch. Gold case, worn smooth by years of handling. Worthless compared to ships and property, a trinket. She took it. Agatha noticed but said nothing. The watch was beneath her interest. The front door opened onto driving rain. November had turned London into a gray wound, bleeding cold water. Charlotte stepped outside. The door slammed behind her. The sound echoed like a cannon shot. She stood on the steps of her childhood home, rain soaking through her dress, and felt the world collapse into a single dark point. Somewhere behind those windows, Carmichael watched. She sensed his gaze like a spider watching a fly leave its web. He knew. He knew the accusation was false. His eyes had held that knowledge, cold and certain. Charlotte walked. She had no destination, no plan, no money. The rain plastered her hair to her face and filled her shoes with icy water. People passed without glancing. A woman in wet clothes, stumbling through Mayfair. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth noticing. By nightfall, she had reached Whitechapel. The streets here smelled of rotting vegetables and coal smoke. Bodies pressed into doorways, sheltering from the rain. A child with hollow eyes watched her pass. This was the London that polite society pretended did not exist. She found a lodging house by the green lamp in its window. The woman who answered her knock had a face like crumpled paper and eyes that had stopped being surprised decades ago. "Got money?" Charlotte's fingers closed around the watch in her pocket, her last connection to her father. She could not part with it. "I have this." She unwound the wet shawl from her shoulders, fine wool now ruined, but still worth something to someone. The woman examined it with expert fingers, nodded once. "3 nights. Then you pay again, or you leave." The room was a corner of an attic, separated from other sleepers by a thin curtain. The mattress was straw that rustled with things Charlotte chose not to imagine. The smell of mold and unwashed bodies pressed close. She lay down. The straw crackled beneath her. Around her, the breathing of strangers rose and fell like tides. Charlotte drew out the watch. In the darkness, she could barely see its face, but she felt its weight, heard its steady ticking. Her father had carried this watch for 30 years, through storms, through battles with pirates off the Barbary coast, through the death of her mother and his ill-considered second marriage. Now it measured time in a Whitechapel slum. Rage kindled in her chest. Small at first, a single coal refusing to die. They would not win. Agatha with her snake smiles, Carmichael with his knowing eyes. They had taken everything, but they had not taken her. She would return, somehow. She would reclaim what was hers and destroy what was theirs. The watch ticked on. Charlotte turned it over in her hands, running her fingers across the familiar case. Her thumb found the crown, pressed it without thinking. A soft click. The back panel swung open. Charlotte held her breath. Inside, folded into a space barely larger than a coin, was a slip of paper. She unfolded it with shaking fingers, held it close to her eyes in the darkness. Numbers, coordinates. Her father's handwriting, cramped to fit the tiny space. And one word beneath them. Find. Dawn crept through the grimy window like a thief. Charlotte had not slept. She sat in the corner of the attic, her back pressed against damp plaster, the slip of paper clutched in her fingers. The coordinates haunted her, numbers that meant nothing without a proper chart. But she recognized her father's hand, every loop and crossing. He had written this in secret, hidden it where only she would find it. Find. One word. An instruction from beyond the grave. Charlotte unfolded the paper again. The numbers swam before her exhausted eyes. Latitude, longitude. Somewhere off the African coast, if her memory of her father's lessons served. He had taught her to read charts before she could read books. Their secret. Agatha had mocked it as unfeminine. But Captain Blackwood believed his daughter should understand the sea that fed them. Now that knowledge might save her. She needed a real chart. She needed someone who could tell her exactly where these coordinates led. And she needed passage to wherever that might be. All impossible for a woman with nothing but a pocket watch and a scrap of paper. Charlotte pressed her palm against her eyes. Think. Her father had not left her a riddle without a solution. He had known her, trusted her. Whatever lay at those coordinates, he believed she could reach it. The docks. Her father had spoken of men who operated outside the law. Cartographers who drew maps for smugglers and pirates. Captains who asked no questions if the price was right. Charlotte had listened to these stories as a child, thrilled by the danger in them, never imagining she would need such knowledge herself. She rose. Her dress had dried into stiff wrinkles, stained with mud from yesterday's endless walk. She looked like what she was, a woman fallen from grace. But perhaps that was useful now. The people she needed to find would not trust someone who looked respectable. The streets of Whitechapel writhed with morning commerce. Costermongers shouted prices. Children darted between carts. The smell of fish and smoke thickened the air until breathing felt like drinking. Charlotte made her way toward the river. The Thames revealed itself first by smell, then by the screaming of gulls, then by the forest of masts rising above the rooftops. She had visited the docks before, always in her father's company, always protected. Now she walked alone, and men's eyes followed her like flies following meat. The rusty anchor announced itself with a sign so weathered the painted anchor had faded to a brown smear. Charlotte hesitated at the door. Inside, she heard rough laughter and the clink of glasses. She entered. The conversation died. A dozen faces turned toward her. Sailors, dockhands, men with scars and missing fingers. The air tasted of cheap tobacco and spilled ale. "Lost, love?" The speaker was a massive man with arms like ship ropes. His smile showed gaps where teeth should be. "I am looking for someone," Charlotte said. Her voice did not shake. She would not allow it. "A cartographer. They call him Blind Tom." Silence stretched. The men exchanged glances. "Never heard of him," the big man said. "I can pay." "With what?" Charlotte reached into her pocket, drew out the watch. She did not offer it, simply let the gold catch the light. "Information first, payment after." More glances. Then a man in the corner spoke. He was old, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with cataracts. "Bold girl? Who sent you?" "No one. I came because my father trusted this place."
"And who was your father?" Charlotte met his milky gaze.
"Captain Edward Blackwood." The name moved through the room like wind through sails. The old man tilted his head. "Blackwood's dead. Heard it last week." "Yes." "And his daughter was cast out for thievery. Heard that too." "I stole nothing." The old man smiled. It transformed his face into something almost kind. "Come, sit. Tell old Tom what you need." Blind Tom, Charlotte realized. He had been here the whole time, watching her with eyes that saw more than their cloudiness suggested. She sat across from him. Up close, she could see his fingers, stained with ink, calloused from years of drawing lines. She placed the paper on the table between them. "These coordinates. I need to know where they lead." Tom did not touch the paper. He leaned close, squinting. "Blackwood's hand. I'd know it anywhere. Drew enough charts for him in the old days." "You knew my father." "Knew him. Respected him. He was one of the few honest captains left. Paid fair and never asked me to chart a slave route." His fingers finally touched the paper, traced the numbers. "Skeleton Coast," he murmured. "Dangerous waters. Ships go there to die." "What is at these coordinates?" "Nothing good. Nothing easy to reach. You'd need a captain willing to risk his ship in those currents." "Do you know such a captain?" Tom was quiet for a long moment. "There is a man. Daniel Cross. Lost his license 3 years ago, smuggling charges. He still sails, but not under any flag the Crown would recognize." "Where do I find him?" "Warehouse at the end of Fisher Lane." "But girl," Tom caught her wrist as she moved to stand. "Cross has history with your father. Not all of it friendly. Be careful what you offer him." Charlotte pulled free gently. "I have nothing left to lose."
"That's when you should be most careful." She left him the watch. It hurt like tearing off skin. But she needed the chart he could provide, and she needed the introduction his name would carry. Fisher Lane smelled of rotting rope and tar. The warehouse at its end looked abandoned, broken windows, boards nailed across the door. Charlotte found a side entrance. Inside, the darkness was absolute. She waited for her eyes to adjust. Gradually, shapes emerged, crates stacked high, a hammock strung between pillars, and a man sitting in a chair, a bottle dangling from his fingers. "Wrong building, love." His voice was rough as barnacles. "Mr. Cross?" He laughed. The sound was bitter. "Nobody's called me Mister in years. What do you want?" "Passage to the Skeleton Coast." Silence. Then movement. He stood, walked toward her, and she saw his face for the first time. He might have been handsome once. Strong jaw, dark hair, eyes that had seen too much. Now stubble shadowed his cheeks, and drink had reddened his nose.
"You're either mad or desperate. Perhaps both. What's at the Skeleton Coast worth dying for?" "Something my father left me." Cross went very still. "Your father?" "Captain Edward Blackwood." The bottle dropped from his fingers, Glass shattered, ale pooled across the floor. "Blackwood," Cross repeated. He said the name like it burned. "You knew him." "Knew him." He took a step closer. His eyes searched her face. "Yes, I see it now. You have his stubborn mouth." "Will you take me?" "Why should I?" "I will share whatever we find." Cross laughed again. This time there was no humor in it. "Share. Generous. And if we find nothing?" "Then we both risked for nothing." He turned away, paced the length of the warehouse. Charlotte waited. "Your father," Cross said finally, "saved my life once. Pulled me from the water when my ship went down. I owed him a debt I could never repay." He faced her again.
Did he know he was going to die? The question struck her like a blow. "Why do you ask that?" "Because hiding coordinates in a watch sounds like a man planning for the worst." Charlotte had no answer. Her father had seemed healthy, strong. His death had been sudden, a fall from a dock, they said, an accident. Or perhaps not. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I intend to find out." Cross studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and withdrew something, a medallion on a chain. He opened it. Inside was a miniature portrait, a woman with Charlotte's eyes. "Your mother," Cross said. "She also owed me something. A long time ago." Charlotte's heart stopped. "How did you—" "Ask me again when we return from Africa. If we return." He snapped the medallion shut. "We sail in 3 days. Be at the East India dock at midnight. Bring nothing you cannot carry. And Miss Blackwood," he met her eyes, "trust no one on my ship, including me." The sea witch cut through black water like a blade through silk. 2 weeks at sea had transformed Charlotte in ways she had not anticipated. Her hands, once soft from embroidery and piano, now bore calluses from rope work. Her skin had darkened under the relentless sun. The fine lady of Mayfair had dissolved like salt in the waves. She stood at the bow, watching the horizon bleed red with sunset. Behind her, the crew moved through their evening routines. They had accepted her presence with grudging respect after she proved useful with navigation. Cross had tested her knowledge of charts on the 3rd day. She had passed, but he still kept his distance. The medallion haunted her. Her mother's portrait, carried by a man Charlotte had never heard of until 3 weeks ago. What debt could her mother possibly have owed a smuggler? Eleanor Blackwood had died when Charlotte was 5. Her memories were fragments. A soft voice singing lullabies, the scent of lavender, gentle hands braiding her hair. Nothing that connected to Daniel Cross. "You will wear a hole in the deck with all that pacing." Cross appeared beside her. He moved quietly for such a large man. A trick learned from years of avoiding customs officers, she supposed. "I am not pacing. I am thinking. Dangerous habit." He leaned against the rail. The dying light carved shadows into his face. Sober, he looked younger than she had first assumed. Perhaps 40, perhaps less. "Ask your question," he said. "You have been circling it for days." Charlotte turned to face him directly. "The medallion. How did you know my mother?" Cross was silent for a long moment. The ship creaked and groaned around them. "We were young," he said finally.
I was a merchant's son with dreams of the sea. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. We met at a dance in Portsmouth. I was 19, she was 17. You loved her? Desperately, foolishly, the way only the young can love. But she married my father. Yes. The word carried weight, years of weight. I was poor, Cross continued. Your father was already a captain. He had a future. I had nothing but ambition. She chose stability, security. I cannot blame her, but I did, for a long time. And the debt she owed you? Cross reached into his pocket, drew out the medallion, opened it. I gave her this the night before she announced her engagement. Asked her to wait for me. Just 2 years, I said.
I would make my fortune and return for her. She took the medallion, promised to wait. He snapped it shut. 2 months later, she married Edward Blackwood. Charlotte felt the deck shift beneath her feet. Or perhaps that was her understanding of her own history. Why do you still carry it? Because she never gave it back. And because I never stopped wondering what might have been. He tucked the medallion away. Your father knew, eventually. We met years later, when I was already smuggling and he was already respectable. He could have turned me in. Instead, he saved my life when my ship went down in a storm. Why? I asked him once. He said that Eleanor had loved me first, and he could not hate a man for that. He was a better man than I could ever be. The admission cost him. Charlotte could see it in the tension of his jaw. Is that why you agreed to help me? Guilt? Partly. And partly because I owed your father a debt I could never repay. Helping his daughter settles the account. You said I should not trust you. You should not. He turned to face the horizon. I am helping you, Miss Blackwood, but I am also hoping whatever we find will be valuable enough to restore my name. I lost my license because a competitor paid customs officers to plant evidence on my ship. I was never truly a smuggler until they made me one. So we both seek restoration. We both seek revenge, he corrected. Let us not pretend otherwise. The skeleton coast appeared on the 18th day. Charlotte understood the name immediately. The shore was littered with the bones of ships, hulls rotted in the sand like the rib cages of dead giants. Masts jutted at broken angles. The sea here was hungry. Cross navigated with terrifying precision. He knew these waters, had sailed them before, Charlotte realized, though he did not explain when or why. They anchored in a natural harbor, protected from the worst currents by a curved arm of rock. The coordinates led inland. The cave should be half a mile from shore, Cross said, studying the chart Blind Tom had provided. Your father marked it clearly. They took a small boat to the beach. Charlotte's boots sank into sands that glittered with fragments of quartz. The air smelled of salt and something older, decay that had baked in the sun for centuries. The cave mouth gaped in a cliff face, half hidden by scrub brush. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Cross lit a lantern. The passage twisted downward. Charlotte ran her fingers along the wall, feeling ancient stone worn smooth by water that had long since retreated. Her father had walked this path, perhaps months ago, perhaps longer. The chamber opened suddenly. The lantern light caught metal. A chest sat against the far wall, iron-banded, sealed with a lock that showed no rust. Someone had maintained it. Cross knelt
examines the lock. Your father's work. I recognize his craftsmanship. He always was particular about his locks. Can you open it?
Not without the key, Charlotte thought. The watch. She no longer had it, but she remembered its weight in her hand, the way the back panel had clicked open.
There was a second compartment, she said slowly. In the watch, beneath the coordinates. Cross looked at her sharply. And? I did not examine it closely. I was too focused on the numbers. She closed her eyes, reconstructed the moment, the thin paper, the cramped writing, and beneath it, something else, something she had dismissed as part of the mechanism. A small brass piece. I thought it was broken clockwork. Where is the watch now? I traded it for the chart. Cross swore under his breath. Then he examined the lock again. This is not a complex mechanism. I can force it. But if your father included any safeguards, we might destroy whatever is inside. We have no choice. He nodded, drew a knife from his belt, worked the blade into the seam of the lock. Charlotte held her breath. The lock clicked. Cross lifted the lid.
No gold, no jewels. Charlotte felt a moment of crushing disappointment before she saw what actually lay within. Documents, stacks of them, bound with ribbon and sealed with wax. She lifted the first bundle, unfolded a letter, read it once, read it again.
What is it?
Cross demanded.
Evidence, Charlotte whispered. Contracts, correspondence, records of every voyage my father's ships made for the past 10 years.
Why would he hide business records?
Charlotte found another document, a ledger showing 2 columns of figures, one labeled official, one labeled actual. Because these prove that someone was cheating him, skimming profits from every voyage. Look at the differences. Thousands of pounds stolen over years. Who? Charlotte found a letter bearing a familiar signature. Carmichael. He was my father's business partner for the African routes. He handled the accounts while father was at sea. She dug deeper, found more.
A deed of sale written in her father's hand, dated 1 year before his death.
Cross, look at this. He took the document, read it. His face went pale. Your father bought diamond mines in South Africa, legally, secretly. And he hid the deed here, where Carmichael could never find it. The final piece of the puzzle lay at the bottom of the chest, an envelope addressed to Charlotte, her father's hand. She opened it with trembling fingers. My beloved daughter, if you are reading this, then Agatha has done what I feared she might. I should have been stronger, should have seen her nature before I married her. But loneliness makes fools of us all. Know this. Everything I built for you. The mines are yours.
The proof of Carmichael's theft is yours. Use them wisely. Return to London not as a beggar seeking justice, but as a queen claiming her throne. And trust no one who knew me, except perhaps the man who once loved your mother. He has more honor than he knows. Your loving father. Charlotte folded the letter, pressed it against her heart. We need to return to England, she said. Her voice was steady now, cold as the iron chest, but not as Charlotte Blackwood. As who? Then, Charlotte looked at the deed in her hands, at the fortune it represented, as someone they will never see coming. The return voyage tested them. A storm caught the Sea Witch 3 days from the African coast. Waves taller than the main mast battered the hull. Rain fell in sheets so thick Charlotte could not see her hand before her face. She worked alongside the crew, hauled ropes, baled water. A sailor named Briggs made a grab for the oilskin pouch where she kept the documents. Perhaps he suspected their value. Perhaps he simply wanted leverage. Charlotte saw him reach, stepped back. He lunged. Cross appeared from nowhere. His fist connected with Briggs's jaw. The man staggered. The deck pitched. Briggs went over the rail without a sound. Cross turned to Charlotte. His eyes held no remorse. "You are not a victim anymore," he said. "You are a hunter. Start acting like one." The words branded themselves into her mind. She stood straighter, felt something shift inside her chest. The Charlotte who had wept in a Whitechapel attic was gone. In her place stood someone new. 3 years had passed since Charlotte Blackwood drowned in a Whitechapel gutter. The woman who emerged from the carriage on this gray London morning bore no resemblance to that desperate creature. Madame Elise Leclerc moved through the world like smoke through silk. Her mourning black whispered against marble floors. Her gloves were French kid leather, soft as sin, and around her throat lay a string of black pearls that seemed to drink the light. The same pearls Agatha had used to destroy her. Charlotte had spent 18 months tracking them. The fence who had purchased them from Agatha's agent, the collector who had acquired them next, the widow in Paris who had worn them to 3 balls before her debts forced a sale. Each transaction left traces. Each trace led Charlotte closer to reclaiming what was hers. Now they rested against her collarbone like a declaration of war. The solicitor's office smelled of old paper and ambition. Mr. Hartley rose as she entered, his eyes flickering over her attire with the calculation of a man who measured worth in fabric and jewels. "Madame Leclerc, a pleasure to finally meet in person." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Hartley. I trust the paperwork is in order?" "Entirely." He gestured to the documents spread across his desk. "The deed to the Kimberley mines is now registered in your name with the Crown. Your late husband's affairs have been settled according to French law. You are, if I may say so, an extraordinarily wealthy woman." Charlotte allowed herself a small smile. "Wealth means nothing without proper society in which to enjoy it." "Indeed. I have taken the liberty of securing an invitation for you." He slid an envelope across the desk. "Lady Ashford's ball, tomorrow evening. Anyone of consequence will be present." "Including Mr. Carmichael?" Hartley's eyebrow rose a fraction. "You know of him?" "I make it my business to know the shipping magnates of London. My late husband had interests in maritime trade. I may wish to continue his legacy." "Then yes, Carmichael will certainly attend. He never misses an opportunity to court potential investors. His fleet has expanded considerably in recent years." 7 ships, Charlotte thought. My father's 7 ships. Excellent. I shall look forward to making his acquaintance. Lady Ashford's ballroom blazed with candlelight. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across the ceiling. The cream of London society swirled in patterns as rigid as any naval formation. Charlotte entered alone. The whispers began immediately. "Who is she?" "French, they say, widowed young." "Those pearls,
Have you ever seen such a color? Fabulously wealthy, diamond mines in Africa. She moved through the crowd like a blade through water. Her French accent was flawless, practiced during those months in Paris while the mines yielded their fortune. Her backstory was immaculate, constructed with Cross's help from fragments of truth and carefully placed lies. A widow, a fortune, a desire to invest. London society opened its arms to money. It asked few questions of those who possessed enough of it. Charlotte was scanning the room for Carmichael when a familiar voice froze her blood. "Madame Leclerc, is it not?" She turned. Agatha stood before her, resplendent in burgundy silk.
3 years had added lines around her eyes and a hardness to her mouth, but her smile remained the same, a cat contemplating cream. "I do not believe we have met," Charlotte said smoothly.
"Agatha Carmichael." She extended her hand. "Formerly Blackwood. My late husband was a shipping captain. Perhaps you have heard of the company? Blackwood Maritime?" Carmichael. She had taken his name. Charlotte filed this information away, keeping her expression pleasantly neutral. "I am afraid I know little of English shipping. My husband's interests were primarily in mining." "How fascinating." Agatha's eyes dropped to the pearls at Charlotte's throat. "What exquisite jewels! The color is most unusual, almost black." "A gift from my husband. He acquired them from a dealer in Paris who specialized in rare pieces." "Indeed." Agatha's smile tightened. "They remind me of a necklace that once belonged to my family."
"Stolen, tragically, by my late husband's daughter, a troubled girl. She died in poverty some years ago." The lie landed like a slap. Charlotte felt rage coil in her stomach, hot as molten iron. "How sad," she said. Her voice did not waver. "Family can disappoint us so terribly. Though I wonder sometimes if the disappointment runs both directions." Agatha's eyes sharpened. "I am not certain I take your meaning." "Only that children rarely become thieves without reason." Perhaps she felt she had something to reclaim. The air between them crackled. Agatha's nostrils flared. "You speak very freely for a stranger, madame." "I speak as I find, Mrs. Carmichael, a habit my husband encouraged. He believed that honesty, however uncomfortable, was preferable to pleasant lies." Before Agatha could respond, a new voice interrupted. "Ladies, I hope I am not intruding." Carmichael. Charlotte recognized him instantly. He had aged well, his silver hair lending distinction to features that had always been handsome. His eyes swept over her with the acquisitive gleam of a collector spotting a rare piece. "Darling," Agatha's voice sweetened, "allow me to introduce Madame Leclerc. She is newly arrived from Paris." "Enchanted." Carmichael lifted Charlotte's gloved hand to his lips. "Paris must mourn the loss of such beauty to our gray shores." "London has its own charms," Charlotte replied. "I am particularly interested in its maritime industry. My late husband often spoke of expanding into shipping." Carmichael's interest visibly intensified. "Did he indeed? I should be delighted to discuss opportunities. The African trade routes are especially profitable for those with capital to invest." "So I have heard." Charlotte allowed her gaze to drift across the ballroom as though bored. "Though I confess I seek partners of proven reliability. Too many ventures fail through mismanagement or, worse, dishonesty." "You need have no such fears with me, madame.
My record speaks for itself. Does it? The question hung between them. Carmichael's smile flickered. I should very much like to see this record, Charlotte continued. Perhaps you might call on me tomorrow? I am taking a house in Belgrave Square. I should be honored. Until then, Mr. Carmichael, Mrs. Carmichael. Charlotte inclined her head and glided away, feeling their stares burn into her back. The evening air bit cold against her heated skin. Charlotte stepped onto the terrace, seeking a moment's solitude. Her hands trembled slightly.
Being so close to them, wearing the pearls they had used to condemn her, speaking their language of polite cruelty, it was intoxicating and terrifying. Quite a performance, she spun. Daniel Cross emerged from the shadows, immaculate in evening dress. The transformation startled her. Gone was the rough smuggler of the warehouse. In his place stood a gentleman of obvious breeding. What are you doing here? The same thing you are, reclaiming what was taken. He moved to stand beside her at the balustrade. My license has been restored. I made certain inquiries, paid certain debts. Captain Cross is respectable once more. And you chose tonight to announce your return? I chose tonight to watch you work. He smiled slightly. You were magnificent. Agatha looked ready to swallow her tongue. She suspects something. Let her. She cannot prove anything, and Carmichael is too blinded by greed to listen to her warnings. Charlotte turned to face him fully. You watched the entire exchange. From a safe distance, I wanted to see how you handled yourself without support. His eyes held something that might have been admiration. You have become a different creature, Miss Blackwood. Charlotte Blackwood is dead, remember? Indeed. Long live Madame Leclerc. A movement caught Charlotte's eye. A carriage across the street, its curtain twitching. Someone inside, watching the house. We are observed, she murmured. Cross followed her gaze. Carmichael's secretary, a man named Whitmore. He trusts no one and forgets nothing. I have been watching him watch you all evening. He was inside, standing by the pillar near the orchestra, taking notes. Charlotte felt ice creep down her spine. How much does he know? About Madame Leclerc? Nothing yet, but he will dig. He always does. Cross turned to face her. You have, perhaps, 3 weeks before he uncovers something that does not fit. Use them wisely. The carriage curtain fell still. But Charlotte knew the eyes behind it were still watching, recording, calculating. The hunt had begun. But she was no longer certain who was hunter and who was prey. Carmichael arrived at precisely 2 o'clock. Charlotte watched from the drawing-room window as his carriage rolled to a stop, noting how he paused to adjust his cravat before ascending the steps. Vanity, a weakness she could exploit. The house in Belgrave Square had cost a small fortune to lease and furnish at such short notice, but appearances were currency in this world. Every silk curtain, every polished surface, every carefully placed object spoke of wealth so established it need not announce itself. Mr. Carmichael, sir. The butler's announcement preceded the man himself. Charlotte rose from her settee with practiced grace, extending her hand as he entered. How punctual you are. A rare quality in businessmen. Time is money, madam. I waste neither. He settled into the chair she indicated, his eyes cataloging the room's contents with barely concealed greed.
Charlotte poured tea from a silver service, allowing him to complete his assessment. "You mentioned African trade routes," she began. "My husband's mines are in Kimberley. It occurs to me that controlling transportation as well as extraction would prove advantageous." "Indeed it would." Carmichael leaned forward. "Currently, most diamond shipments travel on Dutch vessels. The insurance rates are criminal. With proper English shipping, costs could be reduced by 40%. Such a significant margin." Charlotte raised her cup delicately. "And you believe your company could provide this service?" "Blackwood Maritime has the finest fleet on the African routes. 7 vessels, all in excellent condition. Our captains know those waters like their own children's faces." 7 vessels that belonged to my father, Charlotte thought. Captains who once saluted the Blackwood name. "I should like to see these ships," she said. "Before committing capital, naturally." "A tour could certainly be arranged. Tomorrow, perhaps?" "Tomorrow I have engagements." She consulted a small diary that contained nothing but blank pages. "Thursday, late morning. We could take luncheon aboard one of the vessels." Carmichael's smile broadened. "I shall make all arrangements personally." After he departed, Charlotte sat motionless for several minutes. The mask of Madame Leclerc weighed heavily. Beneath it, Charlotte Blackwood screamed for justice, for immediate action, for the satisfaction of watching Carmichael's face crumble when he realized who she truly was. Patience, she reminded herself. 3 years of patience had brought her this far. A few more weeks would bring her everything. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "A messenger, madam. He insists on delivering his letter personally." Charlotte frowned. No one knew this address except Cross, and he would not send messengers. "Show him in." The man who entered was small, unremarkable, dressed in the drab uniform of a commercial courier. But his eyes held intelligence that his humble appearance belied. "Madame Leclerc? You have found her. A letter." "Madam, from a mutual friend." He placed an envelope on the table and departed without waiting for a response. Charlotte broke the plain wax seal and unfolded the single sheet inside. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the message brief. "You are not who you claim to be. Neither am I. Meet me at the British Museum, Egyptian Gallery, tomorrow at noon. Come alone. A friend of your mother." Charlotte read it 3 times. Her mother had been dead for over 20 years. Anyone claiming friendship with Eleanor Blackwood would be ancient or lying. Yet the writer knew her disguise was false. That knowledge alone made them dangerous. She burned the letter in the fireplace and watched the ashes curl and blacken. The Egyptian gallery smelled of dust and antiquity. Stone faces stared from every alcove, their expressions frozen in eternal contemplation. Charlotte walked slowly, examining hieroglyphics she could not read, waiting for contact. The ancient Egyptians believed that speaking a name gave it power, a voice said behind her, that to be forgotten was worse than death. She turned. The speaker was a woman of perhaps 60, dressed in severe black, her white hair pulled back in an unfashionable style. Her face was weathered but not unkind. "Charlotte Blackwood," the woman continued softly, "a name that London has forgotten. But names have a way of returning." "You have me at a disadvantage, madam. My name is Margaret Ashby. I was your mother's governess before she married, and I have waited 20 years to see you stand where you are standing now."
Charlotte's composure cracked slightly. You knew my mother? I raised her, loved her like my own daughter, and I watched her die knowing that her child would someday need help that I could not provide. Why approach me now? Margaret Ashby smiled. It transformed her stern face into something almost beautiful. Because now you are ready. When you fled London, you were a wounded girl seeking escape. Now, you are a woman seeking vengeance. There is a difference. How do you know anything about my intentions? I have watched Carmichael for 15 years, watched him destroy your father's business from within, watched him court your stepmother with promises of shared wealth and power. She moved closer, her voice dropping. I also watched him arrange your father's death. The gallery seemed to tilt. Charlotte gripped a display case for support. Arrange? The fall from the dock was no accident. A man named Briggs was paid £50 to ensure Edward Blackwood did not survive that evening. Briggs. The same name as the sailor who had tried to steal her documents on the Sea Witch. The same Briggs that Cross had sent over the rail into black water. He is dead, Charlotte said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Briggs died 3 years ago. I know. I have my own sources. His death was convenient for many people, including yourself, though I suspect you did not arrange it. Charlotte said nothing. Her silence was answer enough. I am not here to judge you, Margaret continued. I am here to help you. Your mother made me promise on her deathbed that I would watch over you. I failed when Agatha had you cast out. I will not fail again. What can you offer? Margaret reached into her reticule and withdrew a small leather journal. Your mother kept a diary. She gave it to me for safekeeping the week before she died. I have read it many times over the years, searching for meaning. Only recently did I understand what she was trying to tell me. Charlotte took the journal. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed. Eleanor suspected that her illness was not natural, Margaret said. She believed someone was poisoning her slowly. She documented her symptoms, her suspicions, but she never discovered who. My mother was murdered? I believe so. And I believe the same person who killed her eventually killed your father when he came too close to the truth. Charlotte opened the journal. Her mother's handwriting, delicate and precise, filled page after page. Dates, observations, questions that had no answers. One entry caught her eye, dated 2 weeks before Eleanor's death. I have found the letters. He does not know I know. The woman from the shipping office. The promises he made her. When I'm stronger, I will confront him. But I grow weaker each day, and I fear I may never be strong enough. Who was the woman from the shipping office? Charlotte asked. Margaret's face hardened. Your stepmother. Agatha was a clerk in your father's London office before she became your governess. She and Carmichael had been lovers for years. Your mother discovered their correspondence and their plot to take control of the business. They were working together even then? From the beginning. Agatha positioned herself in your household deliberately. She waited for your mother to die, then presented herself as a comfort to a grieving widower. Your father never suspected. Charlotte closed the journal. Her hands were steady now. The rage that had burned hot for 3 years crystallized into something colder, harder, more dangerous.
I need proof that will stand in court. The journal is a start, but it is not enough. You need Carmichael to confess, or you need witnesses willing to testify. Witnesses to crimes committed 20 years ago? Not those crimes. Margaret smiled grimly. New ones. Carmichael has not stopped cheating, stealing, and destroying. He has simply become more careful. Force him into a position where he must act rashly, and he will make mistakes. How? Threaten what he values most. Not his money, not his reputation, his power. Margaret glanced around the gallery, ensuring they remained unobserved. There is a man named Whitmore, Carmichael's secretary. He knows everything, every crime, every bribe, every body buried in unmarked graves. He is loyal because he is paid well and because he fears the consequences of betrayal. Give him reason to fear you more than he fears Carmichael, and he will talk. Charlotte remembered the carriage outside Lady Ashford's house, the twitching curtain, the eyes that saw everything. "Whitmore is watching me," she said. "He suspects something already." Good. Let him suspect. Let him dig. And when he discovers who you truly are, let him understand exactly what that means. Margaret pressed something else into Charlotte's hand. A key. A safety deposit box at the Bank of England. Inside you will find documents I've collected over 15 years. Financial records, witness statements. Enough to ruin Carmichael socially, if not legally. Why give this to me? Why not use it yourself? Because I'm old, and I'm tired, and I want to see justice done before I die. Margaret's eyes glistened. Your mother was the daughter I never had. You are my granddaughter in every way that matters. Use what I have given you. Destroy them. And let Eleanor finally rest in peace. She turned and walked away, disappearing among the stone pharaohs and forgotten gods. Charlotte stood alone in the gallery, holding a dead woman's diary, a key to secrets, and the terrible knowledge that her entire life had been built on murder. The documents from Margaret's safety deposit box spread across Charlotte's desk like a map of corruption. 15 years of meticulous record-keeping, bank statements showing payments to customs officials. Letters between Carmichael and Agatha, dating back to before Eleanor's death. Witness testimonies from servants long since dismissed, describing conversations they should never have heard. Margaret Ashby had been thorough, patient, obsessive in her pursuit of evidence. And now that obsession belonged to Charlotte. She worked through the night, organizing the materials into categories: financial fraud, bribery, conspiracy, murder. Each pile grew taller as the hours passed. By dawn, she had constructed a timeline that began with her mother's poisoning and ended with her own exile. The pattern was elegant in its cruelty. Agatha had positioned herself perfectly, waiting years for the right moment to strike. Carmichael had provided the resources and connections. Together, they had dismantled the Blackwood family piece by piece, claiming the wreckage as their own. A knock at the study door interrupted her thoughts. "Captain Cross, madam." Daniel entered before she could respond. He took in the scattered papers, her disheveled appearance, the cold cup of tea forgotten at her elbow. "You have not slept." "Sleep is a luxury I cannot afford." He moved closer, examining the documents with growing interest. Where did you obtain these? A friend of my mother's. She has been collecting evidence against Carmichael for 15 years. 15 years. His voice held something like respect. That is dedication. That is hatred. Charlotte rubbed her eyes. There is a difference. Cross picked up a letter and read it silently. His expression darkened. This is a love letter. From Carmichael to Agatha, dated 3 months before your mother's death. They were lovers long before my father knew either of them existed. They planned everything. Everything? My mother's death? My father's trust? My destruction? Charlotte's voice cracked slightly. I was never the target, Cross. I was simply an obstacle. A minor inconvenience to be removed when the time was right. Cross set down the letter. His hand brushed hers, the touch unexpectedly gentle. What do you intend to do with this? Destroy them, but slowly, publicly. I want London to watch them fall. A dangerous ambition. They will not surrender quietly. I am counting on that. She stood and crossed to the window. Morning light was beginning to filter through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gold. Whitmore is the key. He knows everything. If I can turn him, Carmichael's entire empire collapses. Whitmore is loyal. Whitmore is afraid. There is a difference. Fear can be redirected. Cross joined her at the window. And how do you propose to frighten a man who has spent decades protecting secrets? Charlotte smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. By showing him that some secrets are already known. The confrontation happened 3 days later. Charlotte arranged to encounter Whitmore at his club, a modest establishment favored by clerks and junior merchants. She arrived as Madame Leclerc, dripping wealth and continental sophistication, and requested a private audience on a matter of urgent business. Whitmore agreed. His eyes held suspicion, but also curiosity. He was a small man, precise in his movements, with the watchful gaze of someone who had spent a lifetime observing others. Madame Leclerc, I confess myself surprised by this invitation. We have not been introduced. We have not, Charlotte agreed. But I know a great deal about you, Mr. Whitmore, just as you know a great deal about me. His expression flickered, a momentary crack in the professional facade. I'm sure I do not take your meaning. Then let me be direct. Charlotte leaned forward. You have been investigating my background since we encountered each other at Lady Ashford's ball. You have discovered inconsistencies. A widow whose husband left no records in French commercial registers. A fortune whose origins cannot be traced through normal channels. A woman who appeared in London society as if from nowhere. Whitmore said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. You suspect that I am not who I claim to be, Charlotte continued. You are correct. But I suspect you have not yet discovered my true identity. Shall I save you the trouble? If you wish. My name is Charlotte Blackwood. I am the daughter of Captain Edward Blackwood, whose company your employer stole through fraud and murder. I am the stepdaughter of Agatha Blackwood, now Carmichael, who arranged my exile through lies and manufactured evidence. And I have returned to reclaim everything that was taken from me. The color drained from Whitmore's face.
His hands, resting on the table between them, began to tremble. "This is madness." "Is it?" Charlotte produced a photograph from her reticule. "This was taken at my father's memorial service. I am standing in the second row, wearing black velvet. Agatha is beside me. You are in the background, speaking with Carmichael." Whitmore stared at the photograph. His breathing had become shallow. "What do you want?" "Justice. But I am willing to negotiate." Charlotte set another document on the table. "This is a contract of immunity, drafted by a solicitor of unimpeachable reputation. Sign it, provide testimony against your employer, and you will be protected from prosecution for any crimes committed under his direction." "You cannot guarantee such protection." "I have friends in Parliament. I have evidence that implicates men far more powerful than Carmichael. They will ensure your safety in exchange for silence about their own involvement." Whitmore picked up the contract, read it carefully. His hands had stopped trembling. The calculating look in his eyes suggested that fear was giving way to self-interest. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I am offering you a future. Carmichael offers only continued servitude. When he falls, and he will fall, everyone associated with him will be destroyed. I am giving you a chance to survive. And if I refuse?" Charlotte smiled again, the cold smile that had become her signature. "Then I will ensure that certain documents reach certain people. Documents that suggest you were not merely an employee, but an active participant in Carmichael's crimes." The distinction between following orders and giving them becomes difficult to prove in court.
"That is blackmail."
"That is leverage." Charlotte rose. "You have 1 week to decide. After that, my offer expires, and my methods become significantly less pleasant." She left him sitting alone with the contract, the photograph, and the weight of decisions that would shape the rest of his life. 4 days later, Whitmore contacted her through intermediaries. He would testify, but he wanted assurances, protection, money, safe passage out of England if matters went badly. Charlotte agreed to everything. She would have promised the moon if necessary. The meeting took place in her study late at night, with Cross standing guard in the hallway. Whitmore arrived nervous but resolute, carrying a leather satchel stuffed with documents. "I have brought everything," he said. "Account books, correspondence, records of payments made to officials, witnesses, and assassins." "Assassins?" "There were 3 deaths that I know of. Your father, a customs inspector who asked too many questions, a business rival who threatened to expose Carmichael's methods." Charlotte felt her heart constrict. "My mother?" Whitmore hesitated. "I was not employed during that period, but I have heard references, conversations that stopped when I entered the room." "Did Carmichael arrange her death?" "I believe so, but I cannot prove it." Charlotte closed her eyes, drew a deep breath. "Then we will make him confess." "Impossible. Carmichael would never admit to such a thing." "He will if he believes no one is listening." Charlotte opened her eyes. "And that is precisely what we are going to arrange." The trap took shape over the following weeks. Charlotte continued her performance as Madame Leclerc, attending balls, accepting dinner invitations, gradually positioning herself closer to Carmichael's inner circle. She invested small sums in his ventures, enough to establish trust without raising suspicion. Agatha watched her constantly.
Charlotte could feel her stepmother's gaze like a physical weight, probing for weaknesses, searching for the flaw in her disguise. But Madame Leclerc was flawless. Her accent never slipped, her backstory held under scrutiny. She was exactly what she appeared to be: a wealthy widow, an eager investor, a potential ally. The invitation came on a Tuesday morning. Carmichael was hosting a private dinner at his country estate, a small gathering of trusted associates and promising new partners. Madame Leclerc's presence was specifically requested. Charlotte read the invitation 3 times, committing every word to memory. The game was entering its final phase. Carmichael's country estate rose from the Hampshire countryside like a monument to stolen wealth. Georgian columns flanked the entrance. Manicured gardens stretched toward distant woods. Every window blazed with candlelight as Charlotte's carriage approached through the autumn darkness. She had dressed with particular care: emerald silk that whispered against her skin, diamonds at her throat and wrists. The black pearls remained locked in her London townhouse. Tonight was not about reclamation. Tonight was about extraction. The device rested against her ribs, hidden beneath layers of corset and fabric. Cross had obtained it from a man who specialized in surveillance equipment for jealous husbands and suspicious business partners. A miniature recording cylinder, activated by a small lever near her waist. Every word spoken within 10 feet would be captured and preserved. Madame Leclerc, welcome. Carmichael himself met her at the door. His smile seemed genuine, though Charlotte had learned to distrust every expression that crossed his face. "Your estate is magnificent," she said. "Far more impressive than I had imagined." "Built by my predecessor. I have merely maintained it." He offered his arm. "Allow me to introduce you to the other guests." The drawing room contained perhaps 20 people, all carefully selected. Charlotte recognized a member of Parliament whose voting record aligned suspiciously with shipping interests, a judge known for lenient sentences in commercial fraud cases, several merchants whose wealth had accumulated faster than their legitimate income could explain. Carmichael's network, gathered in one place. "You keep interesting company," Charlotte murmured. "Successful company. There is a difference." "Is there?" He laughed, apparently charmed by her directness. "I find your candor refreshing, madame. London society is drowning in false modesty." "Perhaps because London society has much to be modest about." Agatha appeared at Charlotte's elbow, materializing with the silent precision of a stalking cat. Her burgundy gown matched her husband's cravat, a deliberate statement of unity. "Madame Leclerc, how lovely that you could join us." "How lovely to be invited." The two women regarded each other with expressions that anyone watching might mistake for politeness. Beneath the surface, currents of hatred flowed like underground rivers. "I understand you have been making significant investments in my husband's company," Agatha continued. "Modest investments. I prefer to observe before committing fully." "A prudent approach." My late husband's daughter could have benefited from such caution. She threw herself into relationships without thinking, poor thing. It destroyed her in the end. Charlotte's hand tightened around her champagne glass. The crystal bit into her palm. "I was not aware that imprudent relationships constituted destruction." "They do when combined with theft and moral corruption." Agatha's smile sharpened. Charlotte Blackwood was a cautionary tale, beautiful, privileged, utterly without conscience. She stole from the family that raised her and fled into obscurity. I believe she died in the streets, though no one thought to confirm it. How convenient that her death freed her inheritance for others to claim. The words escaped before Charlotte could stop them. Agatha's eyes narrowed. I beg your pardon? Forgive me. Charlotte forced her expression into neutrality. I merely meant that death simplifies inheritance disputes. A legal observation, nothing more. Carmichael intervened smoothly. Ladies, dinner is about to be served. Shall we proceed to the dining room? The meal stretched through endless courses. Charlotte ate mechanically, contributing to conversations about shipping routes and investment opportunities, while her mind tracked every escape route, every shadow, every servant who passed behind the guests. The recording device pressed against her ribs, a constant reminder of her purpose. After dinner, the men retired to the smoking room, while the women gathered in a parlor decorated with paintings that Charlotte recognized from her childhood home. Landscapes her father had collected, portraits of ships he had commissioned, all claimed by Carmichael as if they had always belonged to him. You seem fascinated by the artwork, Agatha observed. I appreciate quality. These pieces are exceptional. My first husband had excellent taste. It was perhaps his only virtue. You speak harshly of the dead. I speak truthfully. Agatha settled into a chair, arranging her skirts with practiced elegance. Edward Blackwood was a dreamer. He spent more time at sea than with his family. When I married him, I believed I could reform him. Instead, he grew more distant, more secretive. In the end, I barely knew him at all. Yet you remained. I remained for Charlotte. Someone had to guide the child while her father chased horizons. The lie was delivered with such conviction that anyone listening might have believed it. Charlotte felt her throat tighten with suppressed rage. And how did she repay your devotion? With betrayal, with theft, with accusations so vile I cannot repeat them. Agatha's voice dropped to a theatrical whisper. She claimed that I had conspired against her, that I had plotted with business associates to steal her inheritance. The delusions of a disturbed mind. Were they delusions? Agatha's head snapped toward Charlotte. Something dangerous flickered in her eyes. What an extraordinary question. Extraordinary circumstances sometimes reveal extraordinary truths. Charlotte maintained her pleasant expression. I have learned, in my own business dealings, that accusations often contain seeds of reality. Even the most disturbed minds rarely invent conspiracies from nothing. You seem remarkably interested in a dead woman's fantasies. I am interested in truth, Mrs. Carmichael. A commodity rarer than diamonds in my experience. The tension between them crackled like static before a storm. Other women in the parlor had stopped their conversations, sensing conflict without understanding its source. Carmichael's entrance broke the moment. He crossed directly to Charlotte's side. Madame Leclerc, might I have a word in private? A business matter that cannot wait. Of course. She followed him through corridors lined with stolen artwork into a study that smelled of leather and tobacco. He closed the door firmly behind them. You have made my wife uncomfortable. Your wife is easily made uncomfortable by questions she cannot answer. Carmichael studied her for a long moment. His pleasant social mask had slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath. Who are you? Madame Elise Leclerc, widow, investor. You have verified my credentials yourself. I have verified what you wished me to find. Credentials can be manufactured. Charlotte's hand moved imperceptibly toward the lever at her waist. The device was already recording, But she needed more. She needed a confession. And if they were manufactured, what then?
Then I would wonder why someone would construct an elaborate false identity merely to invest in shipping. Carmichael moved closer. I would wonder what else they might want, what they might be willing to do to obtain it.
Perhaps they want justice.
Justice is an expensive commodity. He smiled, and the expression held no warmth. It requires power, connections, resources. Individuals who seek justice without those things tend to disappear.
Is that a threat?
It is an observation. People disappear frequently in my line of work. Sailors lost at sea, business rivals who suffer unfortunate accidents, inconvenient family members who develop sudden illnesses. Charlotte's heart pounded against her ribs.
Like Eleanor Blackwood?
The question hung between them. Carmichael's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A flicker of surprise, quickly suppressed. You know that name.
I know many names. Edward Blackwood, Charlotte Blackwood.
Briggs, the man you paid to arrange a fatal accident. You have been investigating me. I have been remembering. Charlotte reached up and removed the ornate hairpin that secured her coiffure. Her hair tumbled down in dark waves. I have been remembering everything you took from me. Recognition dawned slowly across Carmichael's face. His skin paled beneath its healthy flush. Impossible. You are dead.
I am very much alive, and I have come to reclaim what belongs to me.
You have no proof, no standing, no support. He retreated behind his desk, reaching for a bell pull.
One word from me and you will be arrested, detained, committed to an asylum for the criminally insane.
Before you summon anyone, you might want to consider what I have already arranged.
Charlotte's voice remained steady. Whitmore has provided testimony. Your accounts have been examined by investigators from 3 separate government departments.
And this conversation is being recorded by a device currently pressed against my ribs. Carmichael's hand froze on the bell pull.
That is impossible.
Modern technology makes many things possible. Every word you have spoken tonight has been captured, including your admission about people who disappear, including your recognition of the names I mentioned.
No court would accept such evidence.
Perhaps not, but newspapers would certainly find it interesting.
Charlotte smiled the cold smile she had learned in 3 years of exile. Imagine the headlines. Shipping magnate confesses to murder. Society wife revealed as poisoner. The scandal would destroy you long before any trial. Carmichael's composure cracked. She saw fear beneath the rage, calculation beneath the fear. What do you want?
Everything.
Charlotte moved toward the door. Your company, your estate, your reputation, your confession signed and witnessed, detailing every crime you have committed against my family.
And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, every newspaper in London receives copies of the documents I have accumulated. Every member of Parliament receives a summary of your bribes. Every judge you have corrupted receives evidence of their own involvement. She opened the door. You have until midnight to decide. I will be in the garden enjoying the autumn air. Join me when you have made your choice. The garden stretched silver and black beneath a hunter's moon. Charlotte walked the gravel paths alone, her emerald gown trailing through fallen leaves. The autumn chill bit through silk, but she welcomed the cold. It sharpened her senses, reminded her that she was alive when so many had expected her to die. Footsteps crunched behind her. Not Carmichael's measured tread, something faster, more desperate. She turned as Agatha emerged from the shadows. "You think you have won."
Her stepmother's voice trembled with barely contained fury. "You think your recordings and documents will destroy us?" "I think the truth will destroy you. The recordings are merely convenient." "Truth?" Agatha laughed bitterly. "You know nothing of truth. You were a child when I married your father, a spoiled, willful child who refused to accept that her mother was dead and that life must continue." "I accepted my mother's death." Charlotte's voice remained steady. "What I never accepted was her murder." Agatha stopped walking. The moonlight bleached her features, turning her beautiful face into a mask of bone and shadow. "Eleanor was dying long before I arrived, a wasting illness that no doctor could cure." "No doctor could cure it because no doctor understood it." Charlotte stepped closer. "Arsenic, administered in small doses over months, symptoms that mimicked consumption. A death that appeared natural to everyone except the woman experiencing it." "You cannot prove that." "I have her diary. She documented everything. The metallic taste in her tea, the weakness that came only after eating, the improvement when she traveled, and the relapse when she returned home." Agatha's composure cracked. Beneath the aristocratic veneer, Charlotte glimpsed something raw and ugly. "Your mother was an obstacle." She spoke the words as if describing an inconvenient piece of furniture. "Edward loved her beyond reason." As long as she lived, he would never see anyone else, never consider anyone else. "So you killed her?" "I freed him. Freed him from a woman who could not give him healthy children, who spent half her days in bed and the other half worrying about ailments that existed only in her imagination." "She was dying because you were poisoning her." "She was weak." Agatha's voice rose. "Weak women do not deserve strong men. I gave Edward 3 years of happiness after she died, 3 years of a proper wife, a well-managed household, a daughter who might have been his if only she had accepted me. I would never have accepted you." "No, you were your mother's creature entirely. The same weakness, the same romantic delusions, the same inability to recognize strength when it stood before you." Charlotte felt the weight of the recording device against her ribs. Every word was being captured, every confession preserved. "And when my father began to suspect?" "When he found the letters between you and Carmichael? Edward was a fool." Agatha moved closer, her eyes glittering with hatred. "He trusted me completely until the very end. Even when he found the correspondence, he could not believe it, could not accept that the woman he loved had been working against him for years." "But he confronted Carmichael. He confronted both of us, demanded explanations, threatened to go to the authorities." Agatha smiled, and the expression transformed her face into something monstrous. "We could not allow that. Too much was at stake. The company, the ships, everything we had worked to build." "So you had him killed?" "Carmichael arranged the details. A man named Briggs, £50 and the promise of passage to America. Your father went for his evening walk on the docks and never returned." Charlotte's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She had suspected, had pieced together fragments of truth from documents and testimony. But hearing the confession from Agatha's own lips made it real in a way that evidence never could. And me? Was I always meant to be destroyed? You were meant to be controlled, married off to someone suitable, kept quiet and compliant while Carmichael and I managed your inheritance.
Agatha's voice hardened.
But you refused to cooperate, refused to accept suitors, refused to sign documents that would have transferred control of the estate. You were becoming a problem. So you manufactured evidence of theft. It was elegant, really. The pearls in your trunk, the jewelry in your reticule, the witness who saw you entering rooms where you had no business. Agatha shrugged. Society was eager to believe the worst. Stepdaughters are always suspected of resentment. It required very little pushing to turn suspicion into conviction. You destroyed my reputation, my future, my life. I removed an obstacle, just as I removed your mother, just as Carmichael removed your father. Agatha stepped closer, and Charlotte saw madness flickering in her eyes. We built everything from nothing. Edward's company was failing before Carmichael invested. Your mother's illness was draining resources that should have gone to expansion. We saved the Blackwood name by eliminating the Blackwoods. And now? And now you have returned to reclaim what you believe is yours. Agatha reached into the folds of her gown. But you have made a critical error. The pistol gleamed in the moonlight, small, elegant, deadly at close range. You assumed that I would allow myself to be destroyed by documents and recordings. You assumed that I would choose scandal over survival. Charlotte did not move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained calm. If you shoot me, there are witnesses inside. Cross is waiting in the servants' quarters. Whitmore has copies of everything. Cross can be dealt with. Whitmore can be bought. And witnesses inside heard us step into the garden for a private conversation. They heard nothing unusual. They will assume you wandered off, perhaps fell into the ornamental pond. Such accidents happen. Carmichael will not support you. He is already calculating how to save himself. Carmichael will do as I say. He always has. Agatha raised the pistol, her hand steady. You should have stayed dead, Charlotte. The girl who drowned in Whitechapel should have remained drowned. The woman who returned is about to discover that some resurrections are temporary. A figure emerged from the darkness behind Agatha. Charlotte saw the movement before her stepmother registered the presence. I would not recommend that course of action. Daniel Cross stepped into the moonlight. His own pistol was aimed directly at Agatha's back. Captain Cross. Agatha's voice held only mild irritation. I thought you were confined to the servants' quarters. I grew bored. Cross moved to stand beside Charlotte. Lower your weapon, Mrs. Carmichael. This confrontation has already been witnessed by 3 constables positioned in the garden. You are bluffing. Am I? Lanterns flared to life around the perimeter. Uniformed figures emerged from behind hedges and statuary. Charlotte recognized Inspector Morrison from Scotland Yard, a man whose career had been built on exposing corruption in high places. Agatha Carmichael, Morrison announced. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and theft. Additional charges may follow pending investigation. Agatha's composure finally shattered. She spun toward the house seeking escape, but more constables blocked the terrace entrance.
Carmichael stood among them, his wrists already bound, his face a mask of defeat. "This is impossible," Agatha whispered. "You cannot prove anything." "We have your confession."
Charlotte touched the device beneath her gown. "We have Whitmore's testimony. We have 15 years of documentation collected by Margaret Ashby, and we have witnesses who will testify to everything they saw and heard tonight." Margaret. The name emerged as a hiss. That interfering old woman. She should have died years ago. She lived long enough to see justice done. That is more than most people achieve. The constables moved forward. Agatha struggled briefly, then subsided into rigid dignity as they led her toward a waiting carriage. Carmichael followed, his head bowed, making no effort to resist. Charlotte watched them go. 3 years of planning, 3 years of patience, 3 years of becoming someone strong enough to destroy the people who had destroyed her family. It was over. Cross moved to stand beside her. His hand found hers in the darkness. "What now?" "Now I reclaim what belongs to me." Charlotte turned to face him. The company, the ships, the Blackwood name. And after that, she looked up at the stars. Scattered across the autumn sky like diamonds on black velvet. For 3 years, vengeance had been her only purpose. Now that purpose was fulfilled, and the future stretched before her like an uncharted sea. "My father spent his life sailing toward horizons he could never reach. Perhaps I will do the same." She smiled, and for the first time in years the expression held warmth. "Will you join me?" Cross raised her hand to his lips. "I thought you would never ask." The moon hung full and bright above Carmichael's stolen estate. Tomorrow, solicitors would begin the process of transferring ownership. Tomorrow, newspapers would trumpet the scandal. Tomorrow, Charlotte Blackwood would step from the shadows and reclaim her rightful place in society. But tonight, she stood in the garden where her enemies had fallen, holding the hand of a man who had seen her at her worst and chosen to stay. Tonight, she allowed herself to feel something other than hatred. Margaret Ashby had asked what she wanted beyond vengeance. The question had seemed impossible to answer at the time. Now, watching the constables' carriages disappear down the drive, Charlotte understood. She wanted to live, not as Madame Leclerc, the constructed identity built for destruction, not as the ghost of Charlotte Blackwood, haunting the edges of a world that had rejected her. She wanted to live as herself, whoever that might turn out to be. The black pearls waited in London, symbols of everything that had been taken and reclaimed. She would wear them to the trial, would watch Agatha's face when she recognized them, would let them serve as final testimony to the truth of her survival. But after that, she would put them away, lock them in a vault, and never look at them again. Some reminders were too painful to carry into the future. Cross squeezed her hand. "The carriage is waiting." "Let it wait." She turned to face the house one last time. The windows still blazed with candlelight. Guests still mingled inside, unaware that their host had been led away in chains. Tomorrow they would read about the scandal in their morning papers. Tonight they continued their conversations about politics and investments and the endless machinations of society. Charlotte had been part of that world once, had believed that its approval mattered.
had nearly destroyed herself trying to meet its impossible standards. Never again. She would rebuild the Blackwood Company, would honor her father's memory by sailing the routes he had charted, would prove that strength and success could be achieved without corruption and murder. But she would do it on her own terms, as herself, without masks or false identities or elaborate performances. The moon was setting as they walked toward the waiting carriage. Dawn would come soon, bringing a new day and a new beginning. Charlotte Blackwood had died in a Whitechapel gutter 3 years ago.
The woman who climbed into the carriage beside Daniel Cross had no name yet, no fixed identity, no predetermined future. She would choose her own name, write her own story, become whoever she wished to become. The carriage wheels began to turn, carrying her away from the scene of her victory and toward the uncertain promise of tomorrow. Behind her, the stolen estate faded into darkness. Ahead, the road stretched toward London and everything that waited there. Charlotte closed her eyes and let herself breathe.